the sunshine in California for the Acura Grand Prix of Long Beach. This is round 3 of IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship. It's frantic here on the streets of Long Beach. This is the Acura Grand Prix of Long Beach. Let's go!
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the IMSA Endurance Hour podcast. I'm Matt Yocum, and what a fun show that we have ahead. Robert Wickens preparing to put another check mark next to his goal list as he prepares for Long Beach, and how a 112-year-old camera shot some of the most incredible images from the Sebring 12 hours. And in studio, it's an honor to have my pal, Leigh Diffey, my teammate on the IMSA WeatherTech broadcast, and we've been friends for 20 years, stopping by in studio. Great to have you here, my friend.
Thanks for having me here. I've walked past this room quite a bit. I'm like, oh, that's where it happens. So nice to actually be in here.
And I always tell people, like, what's Diffey like? I said, what you see as far as the excitement, the energy, and the passion on camera is how he is talking about, hey, mate, where are we going to go for dinner tonight? I got some ideas, but I always say, you take 2 Ford Country Squire wagons with the fake wood on the side, and Leigh can make it sound like the last lap coming out of the bus stop at Daytona in the Rolex 24, because you just have such an incredible energy and excitement. And as your pal, I love seeing it. And I find myself at times during a race going, all right, get back to actually working the broadcast instead of watching, because you just make it so entertaining.
I think I like to, and it happens subconsciously. I think when I'm commentating, I'm thinking about everybody who's involved. So not just the driver behind the wheel. It's the team owners, it's the mechanics, it's the engineers, it's the people back at the shop. I mean, everybody is so invested in that, and certainly in that result, but also in that moment. And so, I know that there are a lot of people watching the way that I'm watching. And I kind of remember being a kid, whether it be watching football or watching motor racing or whatever it is, what it was like sitting in the lounge room with mum and dad, and you're cheering on your favorite team or driver or rider or whatever it was. And I kind of feel now, many years on, almost 30 years in this industry, I'm still that kid on the couch, just doing what I used to do at home, but now I'm doing it on television.
Same thing for me. I feel like when I'm doing a broadcast and I do my little 30-second hits from pit lane, I'm doing it for the guy that goes over the wall, his grandmother who's watching, or his mom. And I just take that because if they're engaged and they're excited about that moment, that story, and I make a connection, that's the biggest goal that I always try with every story that I do. Because like you say, I remember when I was sitting there watching Richard Petty and David Pearson battle out of turn 4 and they're sliding through the grass, or AJ Foyt jumping in Preston Hens 935, and just everybody completely shocked how he went so incredibly fast in the rain. And those are the type of things that I love to do for the folks at home, because I always remember what it was like when I was a kid. In wide world of sports, you might get your 15 minutes of auto racing, but you went through cliff diving and everything else.
Well, as you know, like when you first started in TV, and we've been told for many, many years up until this point, it's bring the audience in, include the audience. It's like you're at the pub having a beer with them or whatever. And so that's the enjoyable part of it as well. And then if we be good storytellers, if we do our job correctly and be good storytellers and bring the audience in and involve them and make them feel like they're sitting beside you. And, for us on our IMSA team, or it could be NASCAR or IndyCar or whatever it might be, Supercross, where I get to work alongside Ricky Carmichael. If the broadcast team gets on well off air, they get on well on air, and then that helps bring the audience in, be more inclusive, So I think we have the luckiest jobs in the world to be able to talk about a sport that we love, and then bring the viewers in and tell them maybe a little bit more and some inside stuff. You're always great at digging up stories. So, give the fans a little bit more and make it fun.
And one of our, I think if you look at the goals, and it comes from the top, and our boss, Sam Flood, who I always tell people the greatest producer I ever worked with when he brought NBC into NASCAR in 2001. The first time we talked, he was calling me from the Olympics. And that was our introduction, and we talked a little bit about each other, and I'll never forget, I still have it, and I told him about this a couple years ago, that he sent to all of the team an envelope. You open the envelope, and all it had inside was a piece of paper with a big question mark. And it's always tell me why this happens, why this tire changer, holds the gun a certain way, but it's always let the viewer know the complete story. Don't leave them hanging. And he has such an incredible storytelling, uh, quality, and that just carries down to every member of the team.
I always thought that I was a reasonable storyteller before I joined NBC, and Sam was the guy who brought me over. I was with Speed Channel then, and Sam brought me over to do Formula One and IndyCar, and he said, "Hey, you're not just going to do that; you're going to do the Olympic Games as well." And after I got up from my heart attack, he said, "Look, you call races, and that means you can call races of any discipline." And so we're going to throw a bunch of different stuff at you and see what sticks, see what works. And you don't have to question why you're here. We've employed you for a reason, so go do your job. Him being a huge Patriots fan, and Bill Belichick, with the Pats, go do your job. You've already made it here, so now go do your job. And going through the NBC system, and certainly the Olympic system, that's where I really learned the value of even greater storytelling. If you kind of tell a story up to this point, but that's not enough. Like, go deeper. Really, really furnish the audience and the fans with a little bit more. I remember being at the Winter Olympics in Pyeongchang, and there was a South Korean athlete in sliding, and we had a South Korean production assistant in the booth for us, and I said, "Look, we have our research department, and we get all of this great stuff, these daily updates, and we've done our research." But I said, "What are your newspapers saying? Can you find out more about this guy? He was on the verge of winning gold, and our production assistant dug around, found out this information, which we then got verified by NBC Research. And it turns out this guy lived on a tiny island in the southern end of South Korea. He was abandoned by his parents, raised by his grandmother. His grandmother had never seen him compete in sliding, and he won a gold medal that day.
Wow.
So that's to me, that's what NBC has taught me and yourself and everybody about the value of good storytelling. We could have commentated that guy coming down the mountain. He wins gold. It's great for the home nation. There's a great story. But if you take it to that extra depth and that extra level.
Oh, yeah, because to me, I always tell people, I look at it more like you've got a lot of free agent fans out there, and if you can make a connection with them, with a driver, with a team, because of some unique story that they're like, "Wow, I wanna go have a beer with that person, or I wanna go have dinner with that person. I wanna hear more." And so those are the type of things that you always dig for, and if you look at the IMSA paddock, there are so many incredible people and stories that haven't been told that we continue to bring, not only to America, but to the world, with IMSA's, YouTube channel as well, that I just see in the paddock back at Roar. That was a Rolex 24 weekend a year or two ago. And then it was on steroids for the Rolex weekend. I could not believe the crowds, but that's been the trend that we're seeing. There's such a huge wave of momentum, and you can feel it and see it as well. What do you think some of the things that kind of equate to the big jump that we're seeing, the big wave that we're riding?
I think because people just love sports cars. First and foremost, it's so cool. Look, I've been a part of it for long enough that I've seen the ebbs and flows. Back when there was the Grand Am Rolex Sports Car Series and the American Le Mans Series, and they were fierce opponents before the merge. Thankfully, that merge happened, and I do believe that what we are seeing now is a direct, not response, but a product of the amalgamation and the merging of those two series, and for the benefit of sports car racing. I think the technical package and the rules have a lot to do with it. You can, both you and I and any sports car fan have seen manufacturers come and go if they don't feel that the playing field is right. And the playing field right now, I don't think has ever been better.
Mhm.
We've been saying this probably for a couple of years now, and certainly since the introduction of the GTP, the modern era of GTP, that the golden era wasn't back when, the golden era is now. And whether that be manufacturers, drivers, tracks, a date equity, IMSA now for the last couple of years is coming out with their schedule for the following year incredibly early. Like we already know now what the 2026 schedule is, which is fantastic. People can bank on that. The fans are included, seeing great crowds. The racing has been phenomenal, and more manufacturers coming into GTP and the GTD, and we're looking at a couple of GTD cars here. I just all of the ingredients are right now. Just it feels right, and the product looks right and feels right. On this show, you've had John Doonan, the president of IMSA. I think a really important thing is that John started out as a fan,
Mhm.
and now he's the boss. So he remembers that 7-year-old boy at Road America, that he told you about.
Yep.
And so when you've got a leader like John Doonan, and with the support of Jim France and Ed Bennett and everybody, I think that young fan inside John Doonan now as the president of the series, of the most successful sports car series in the world, I think he still draws on that 7-year-old kid, with his dad at Road America, and that's really important for all of us.
And I think you see that when we're doing the grid walk, and they're doing so many things for the future in the present geared towards kids. The STEM programs
Mhm.
that they're putting forth. I saw, I think, 7 different high school groups at Sebring walking through and talking to teams and getting a tech talk, a PR talk, so they could see the landscape of IMSA. So maybe there's some place, because there's some place for everybody. You just have to find it, because there are so many different areas that are exciting jobs, and it's neat to see the look on their faces when they're like, "Wow, this is what I want to go to school for."
How about the fun factor? And I point to these 2 AO Racing Porsches here that PJ Hyatt, the team owner, created. It's a serious business. These cars aren't cheap. You've got staff to employ and shops to run, et cetera, but has a bit of fun, with the dinosaur theme, for his children, and it turns into a merchandising juggernaut
Yeah.
unexpectedly. So I know that we've got a production member on our staff where he takes them around, the stuffed toys, takes them around and takes different photos in different locations for his daughter. PJ Hyde didn't know that was gonna
Mm.
happen when he did that. That was just a lovely ode to his children. And so I love that fun factor within a serious business.
So speaking of kids, and when you were a kid in Australia,
Mhm.
how did the racing bug, and at first it was 2 wheels, correct?
Correct, yep.
How did you get bitten by the racing bug?
My grandfather raced motorcycles, and I don't know why. I never had it explained. He wouldn't let my father race, and so when I was young, my dad bought my brother and myself motorcycles, and I think he lived vicariously through us. So I started racing bikes when I was 6, and the local motorcycle club that we were a part of. This is dirt track motorcycles, mainly flat track, a little bit of motocross thrown in, and just out of our little club, we had so many champions come out of that who were our friends. And, when I got older, I stopped riding when I was about 16, focused on school. But again, our mates, we grew up at a time where people went on to become motocross, supercross, road race champions. My oldest friend in life, Daryl Beatty, he and Mick Doohan went on to become 1 and 2 in the world in MotoGP. And so I was just surrounded by racing. Um, and, I was all bikes with a little bit of cars thrown in over there, and it was amazing that my career has done a whole, flip, especially once I got into television where it was predominantly cars with a little bit of bikes. I get to do Supercross now, which is great. Um, and so, yeah, I was just around it. I was just around it from a very young age, and I'm really pleased and proud to say that that first motorcycle I ever raced, which was a 1974 Honda Elsinore MR50, I had completely restored, and it sits in my home office to this day as a reminder of where it all started.
That is awesome. I wish that I had my 1973 Indian 50, that, I could find that and restore that, which would be a great memory. But I go back to our dinners, and we talk about our team. And those are some of the most important parts of the weekend, just because of the fun meter is always pegged with stories.
Yeah.
And everybody always has incredible stories. And I remember you telling a story once that you were on the path to become a teacher, a phys ed teacher or something like that. And I'm going, this is just like Tom Sneva, teacher, a principal, Indy 500 winner. And so, how did you make the turn from in college, becoming a teacher? teaching kids that were not that much, younger than you.
Yeah.
It's almost like Mark Harmon in summer school. I kind of pictured you with like a Hawaiian shirt in a way of the cool teacher, that you want to have for the sub. So how'd you make that pivot?
Just doing, when I was 20, I was still in college, at the local motorcycle club. I'd stopped riding, my brother was still racing, and they came and asked me to commentate flat track motorcycles. And they said, "We've got $60 and short races, just 4-lap races." I called over 90 races that first day, sitting in a wooden timing shed, like shack on the side of the track with the timing and scoring ladies behind me, and I just had a handheld microphone and away I went. And then, it kind of grew, hate the word organically, but it did grow organically from there to a neighboring club in Toowoomba. My very next commentary was in Toowoomba, the home of Will Power, at a place called Echo Valley, which turned out to be where Will did his first ever car race because his dad used to race there. And Will Power's mum used to do the books for the promoter who hired me. So, and I didn't learn that story until decades later, when Will and I were talking one time and our worlds collided. And it just went from there. And I did go on to become a school teacher for just 2.5 years. But I was commentating on weekends and struggling to get back to school on Monday to teach school. And it got to a point where I thought, maybe I could, try this as a career. And had very supportive parents. We didn't have a lot of resources. Mum and dad were very much blue collar people, but they were really street smart, and they could see how much it meant to me, and they encouraged me, and they chase your dream, don't give up. And so I took a leave of absence from school, and I moved from Brisbane to Sydney, and it went from there.
I remember at dinner one night, and I conjured up images of Mel Gibson, in one of the Mad Max movies. And you're like, "Mate, I had my head like stuck out the top of this van. It was some kind of dude event."
It was Paul Morris. Paul Morris, who lots of people know now, thanks to Dale Earnhardt Jr. and Shane Van Gisbergen and many others. It was Paul had this party on his ranch, on his farm in Australia, which was not too far from the Gold Coast, and it was called the Dude's Acres 500, and it was just a crazy event for all of his mates where you had to, do a lap of his farm on a horse, get off the horse, get on a jet ski in his lake, do a lap of the lake, then jump in a four-wheel Odyssey and do that. Then you had to chug a beer and go down a slip and slide, and they were timing it, and whoever did it, the fastest, and they wanted me to commentate it. Well, it turned out that Paul's dad, Terry Morris, was one of the owners of the Australian Super Tourers, not supercars, the 2-liter Super Tourers back then. And Paul said, "Dad, you got to get this guy. Diff was fantastic. He was so energetic, and we were just calling silly stuff, And within a matter of weeks, I had an audition to go to a race, and it kind of it went from there. So right time, right place, a lot of hard work, some good contacts, and all the pieces of the puzzle came together to get me my start.
But you were sticking out of a van or something, commentating other people doing
I
things?
was sitting in the middle of the van. Paul Morris was driving, and one of his mates, and they had drilled a hole through the roof and had like a, like the tannoy,
Yeah.
the loudspeaker out of the thing, and that's what I was commentating on.
I always tell people, kids, I always say you've got to be your own advocate. You can't wait for somebody else. You've got to be the one that's knocking on doors, calling people. Now, and they're like, "Well, we could email." No, you can't. I said, "You've got to do the person to person. You've got to hear the voice." And you, not once, but maybe twice, called up Bernie Ecclestone looking for a job in F1.
I did.
And he actually took the call.
He did. It took a few hours, but his executive assistant rang me back in the middle of the night, and I had met I'd met Andrew Marriott through another mutual friend. For those who are IMSA fans, you'll remember who Andrew Marriott is, a legendary pit reporter and commentator. And Andrew ran a production company in London, and I met him at a Formula One launch, and he just said, "Look, if you do come over this way, maybe I could give you a little bit of commentary work here or there." And so I was hell bent that I was going to go to the UK and call Formula One. So I just rang Bernie Ecclestone. I thought, why not just start at the top? And he did take my call, and I was then working for Network 10 in Australia and said, "This is what I'm doing and this is what I'd like to do." And he told me the people to call who ran his TV thing. And at the end of the day, nothing came of that. But,
Well, you talked to Bernie Ecclestone.
but at least he took my call. Yeah. So I thought just swing for the fences and talk to the guy right at the very top.
I always go back to what Roger Penske always says, luck is when preparation meets opportunity. And you've got to be, yes, in the right place at the right time, but you've got to be prepared for that.
Yeah.
And I remember my biggest break came because of a hurricane. I actually had so many comp days built up. I took the weekend off at New Hampshire. They were going to have 2 modified, 2 Busch North Series, and a truck race. And I was going to be Glenn Jarrett's pit spotter. Had my scanner. I'd done all kinds of stats for Glenn because he shot more from the hip than from a notepad.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, the guy who was going to be the second pit road reporter, Jeff Willer, couldn't make it because the Busch race was rained out. And so Glenn called David Hall at TNN and said, "Look, Matt's a talent on your air. He does TNN's race day show. He's here. Let him work pit lane, pit road with me. And I don't want to do 5 races by myself." They said, "Look, if he doesn't suck on Saturday, we'll let him do Sunday." So Glenn calls me. He's like, "Matt, you're in. Just don't suck on Saturday. I don't want to do 3 races by myself." And that was the biggest break, but there were so many along the way that you can't say this is the biggest that got me here, but that was the one that really was the springboard. For you, what was it?
For sure, the Australian 2-litre Super Tourers. Do you remember back in the day, the BTCC, the British Touring Car Championship? It was the Audis and the BMWs and the Volvos and all that. Well, they had the same owners from that, had that series in Australia, and that then exposed me to the television network in Australia, which then I was able to get the V8 supercars. And then doing that was a major launching pad. I think in my career in totality, the biggest thing has been NBC. Doing what I've done for that network and just going in so many different directions and not just doing motorsport, doing other things. I think that's probably been the biggest leap off point. And as you do, you get approached by a lot of young people. They all want to know what the magic ticket is into the industry, and there is no magic ticket. I think these days there are so many more resources that you can refine your skills, cell phones, YouTube, computers, recording equipment. We didn't have that, right? So we were back and making tapes on VHS, or if you were lucky enough, I remember somebody shot me once on community television, and that was going to be the lead on my show reel, and it was all grainy and horrible, but I had something on tape. Now you can do it on your phone. But I always tell the talented young people who, for a start, they come and ask you. So that's step one. Don't just sit back and spectate. But there are so many opportunities out there, and there are the people who can acknowledge the opportunity. That's the masses. But the few are the ones who actually act on those opportunities. And to me, that's the line of differentiation. And to answer your question, long way around, I was always prepared. If you gave me a sniff, if that door was open just a little bit, I was in there. And one of my friends back home in Australia who I used to teach school with, he used to say, "Diff, you've got more front than a Roman sandal." So if I thought that there was any opportunity to get in there to take that next step, I was there and I would do anything. And when I first started in television, working freelance on a general sports show, do you want to work Christmas Eve? Yes. Do you want to work Christmas Day? Yes. Do you want to work New Year's Eve? Yes. Do you want to work New Year's Day? Yes. I never said no. And I think you've got to do those reps. It's repetitions, right? You've got to do the hard yards. You've got to do your reps. You've got to earn your way.
I mean, through the years, and you never say no, you never turn down, you never call in sick. It's just our industry. I've done shows with a broken collarbone. Nobody even knew about it. I had to have the BSI folks,
Yep.
clip my RF pack for me because I couldn't do it because it hurt so bad. I've had pneumonia, but you get up and go, what's the craziest show that you've done? Because you've had some incredible color analysts. You're sort of like the Jim McKay of 2025 in a sense that, you're doing the Olympics, you're doing Supercross, you're doing sports cars, you're doing NASCAR, and you've got such a wealth of knowledge in all these different areas, and you bring the A game excitement, which is why people love when they hear your voice, whatever it is, it already jacks up the excitement level, redlining it. So, what are some of the unique folks that you've worked with that you look back and like, oh, mate, that was a crazy show?
I think the most bizarre, if I can use that word, most bizarre show that I've done was with Greg Norman and Frank Nobilo. I called golf for about 5 years, and it was in 2009, and I was back in Australia. I would work here all year for Speed Channel. I was living in America, and I would go back to see family and friends, and my dad was really sick. And we were all really excited that Greg Norman was coming to Network 10 for golf, but he was only gonna do Saturday and Sunday. And I'd done Thursday, Friday. Tournament was really setting up well. I was working with Frank Nobler and some other guys. Greg came in, and we had a good Saturday. Wasn't great. We had a good Saturday, and then Saturday night, my father passed away, and I didn't tell anybody. So I turned up for work the next day, and I think we had it was either 4 or 6 hours on air. They were long days, and so I told the producer in case something happened, and but then I didn't tell anybody else. So I went on air and went on camera as the host, sitting alongside Greg Norman. And growing up in Queensland, Australia, Greg Norman, like superstar, right? So it was a pretty big deal for me sitting beside the shark. And then once the studio portion was done, we got into calling the tournament. And about halfway through, I just had this little yellow notebook, which I still have. And I said, "Hey, Greg, you're not to know this, nor does anyone, but my father passed away last night." And I said, "Working alongside you is the motivation that's getting me through." And Greg just like looked at me like this, and he put his arm around me, gave me a pat on the shoulder, and we went on. That's the most bizarre.
Wow.
Yeah.
What an incredible moment. And because everybody is in that position at some point in time, and they know when you're losing a parent, it totally blows up your entire world because they are your best friend. They are everything to you. And what were some of the things that your dad instilled in you that you to this day instill into your boys?
Well, that was the point, was not giving up. Like, because 'cause I'd done 3 days, and he was in a position where he wouldn't have known if I was there or not. So I said to my mum, "Hey, dad always instilled in us, finish the job. Never give up and finish the job." So I said to mum, "I'm not gonna come back and be with you. I'm gonna finish this." And she said, "Good on you, love. That's what you should do." So that's what dad wants you to do. And so I think that's what I've instilled in our boys, is that, um, do it with quality, do it properly, finish the job, don't give up. Just I think that they're the key pillars from dad.
How do you prepare? Because you do so many different. Some people go, well, I do 3 different auto racing series, and that's what I've got. You do so much that are polar opposite, but yet it's the same Leigh Diffey quality work. So what's your preparation like? Do you have a certain windows before an event that you just dive in and lock yourself in the office and you go at it? Or a little bit of, how do you get your, because so many people don't realize there's an opportunity to over prepare,
Yeah.
and then you can't remember anything and how you want to work it and navigate it into a show.
I think that there's a genuine fear of being underprepared, going on the air, and I've had dreams, I've had nightmares
Oh,
about
me
that.
too.
So,
You wake up in a cold sweat, you're like, "Oh my gosh," it's like when you miss a test,
yeah. Um, well, I mean, case in point today, I've got another thing to do this afternoon, here in Charlotte, and, in between when I finish your show and then I'm gonna go and do some Supercross homework for this weekend. So you do it when you can, where you can. I watch a lot of tape, to remind myself of what has happened in years previous at that upcoming event. We are very lucky to have on IMSA, but also on NASCAR and on the Olympics and whatever else, Supercross, we have terrific research teams. But I like to use the story that in particularly, say, the Olympics, we will have a mountain of research, and you have to go through it. You have to read it. You have to. I'm lucky I've got a good memory, but you have to read it. You have to absorb it. You have to compartmentalize it, and then determine where you use that in the call. And more often than not, a lot of it just goes by the wayside, but you have to go through it and read it and absorb it and do. I'm unfortunately in this day and age, I'm still a hand writer. Like if I write it, I'll remember it.
Yep.
If I type it, I don't, and that frustrates me because I'd like to be a little more electronic. Like when I was working with Townsend Bell and James Hinchcliffe on IndyCar, Hinch was an iPad guy and everything was on there, whereas I'm a paper guy. Townsend's a paper guy. On IMSA, Calvin Fish is a paper guy. Um, and I'd prefer to be more electronic, but it's just the way my mind is. I need to write it to remember it. And so it's all of the above, Matty. It's watching, it's reading, it's writing. Um, I don't waste time on airplanes. If I'm not sleeping, I'm researching. So I find that as a great time to time management. Use time that could be dead time to do something productive, and then when you're with family, with your daughter, at my boys, whatever, like make that time quality time. And when you can, get in the office and do that research, and then kind of, I think through the industry, we've been forced to be good time managers, so that's how I do my research.
For you working with Calvin, you mentioned Calvin Fish, and nobody has more of a Bible, so to speak,
Yeah,
of sports car racing
yeah.
than he does. It's all up here, but yet it's copied down here. For you, what are some fun moments with Calvin through the years? Because you guys are not just coworkers, you're not just friends, you're brothers.
Yeah. So many. I'd probably lean on Le Mans. We've had many great years in Le Mans, and most recently, we got to call the 100th anniversary of Le Mans together. That was really special because Le Mans is where I met Calvin in the late 1990s. So, and when I was still living in the UK, I had his business card, and I was making my way to the US, and I rang him one day, and I said, "You've got two addresses on your business card. One's Atlanta and one is Ohio, Columbus, Ohio, or something like that." I said, "Where do you live?" And he said, "Atlanta." I said, "Is that a good place to live?" He said, "It's great." And I said, "That's it. I'm moving to Atlanta." I, ba- I based my whole international move on where Calvin Fish lived, but we've had great times, and you referred to this before. It's what you do off air that translates to on air, and if you have a great relationship with your coworkers off air, that filters through. It was like back in the it's appropriate we're sitting in this studio talking about IMSA and stuff because when we had Grand Am and the American Le Mans series, it was on Speed Channel, and there were five of us who did both series. That was not to the satisfaction on the Grand Am side or to the satisfaction of the American Le Mans series side, but it was myself, Calvin Fish, Dorsey Schrader, Brian Till, and Chris Neville. And our boss then at Speed Channel, Rick Miner, used to say, "I only have to make one phone call to get any one of these five guys because they're always together," which was true.
Yeah.
And that was a fun period of time. So and I think, as you know, and you've loved for many years, the eclectic nature about sports car racing and the personalities that it brings and the pro-am nature. You have to have um, the 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 business people involved to have the finances to run the team. They need the professionals for that combination if you're talking outside of manufacturer involvement. And I think maybe more than any other category of racing that I've been involved in, I don't think I've met a more interesting and intriguing group of people than I have in IMSA. Just because of that, it could be, software people, oil and gas people, entrepreneurs of all, um, businesses. I mean, and the walks of life that you get to talk about within the IMSA paddock, and then you're surrounded by these professional drivers from all over the world. I think that's what makes this series so amazing.
And yet, when you walk through the paddock, everyone seems like they're just an average guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember at Sebring, I did one story on a gentleman who came over to Orlando. His family owned a wholesale grocery business.
Hmm.
He was going to college in Orlando at the community college, but he would go to Daytona for the Camel Continental, the Rolex, the Paul Revere.
Hmm.
And that really solidified, his passion for sports car racing. But he also shopped at a grocery store named Publix. And he took that back to the family business and completely turned it upside down and mega, billion-dollar family company, but all because, in a way, of sports car racing and it linked all together, and he was back running there. And those are the kind of stories that you love to find and are easy to find because everyone is so approachable. Everyone is just so, you don't want to say normal, but it's like everybody is just an average person in the paddock. Now, they might have a real cool G400 parked at the airport.
I think we have been lucky enough to be around the super teams and the super owners for so long, the Roger Penske's, the Chip Ganassis, the Rick Hendricks, the Jack Roush's, etc. But in sports car racing, here, these cars are an example. PJ Hyatt and what he's created with Gunnar Jeanette in a very short space of time. There's just really intriguing stories in this sport, and that's why I love it because, if we're in the business of entertainment and storytelling, there is never a shortage of stories in IMSA.
Barry Sheen, great friend of yours. What was he like to work with in the broadcast booth?
Life was
I mean, as crazy as you would anticipate it would be, looking at his book.
Yeah, it was fascinating. For those who don't know, Barry Sheen was an icon, and still very much is. He was a two-time 500cc world champion, and now that you'd call that MotoGP world champion. Best friends with James Hunt. There's a terrific documentary out there called "When Playboys Ruled the World," because it was the last time that Britain had a MotoGP champion and a Formula One world champion, and Barry and James Hunt were those world champions at that time. And so when Barry moved to Australia and working in TV, and then my first big job in TV was what is now known as V8 Supercars, and Barry and I worked shoulder to shoulder. And I was a young guy in my 20s, and yeah, Barry taught me a lot. Barry, there were some entertaining times on and off air, that's for sure. But he was such a character and just so well regarded globally, and a legend. And so for a TV newbie to be sitting alongside a world champion and an icon was really a fast education, and he taught me a lot. And I didn't know this until after it happened, but when I moved from Australia to the UK, he behind the scenes, because of his immense power and influence, and his status certainly globally, but in the UK especially, he would ring on almost a weekly basis the head of sport at the BBC and say, "You've got to take care of my young friend. Leigh Diffey's coming to England. You've got to get a job for this guy. I've worked with him. I vouch for him." And so after the BBC had given me the job, the head of sport then said, "By the way, I believe you know a certain Barry Sheen." And I said, "Yes." He said, "Yes, he's been burning my phone down, telling me I need to employ you." So again, hard work, opportunity, right place, right time, good people, cherish relationships. And so all of the magical ingredients went into the mix.
The first time we worked together was Torque Off-Road Trucks.
Oh, they were the days.
Those were the days. You were in a little trailer out just in a field on the course. And from that point on, though, I kind of questioned some of your restaurants that you picked, but that's time for another podcast. But trucks, Olympics, NASCAR, IMSA WeatherTech sports cars. When you look at what is your body of work every year, what's the most difficult to prepare for or the most difficult to broadcast?
This IMSA is challenging. IMSA, even though I've been doing sports cars for a long time, it's just the nature of the beast because you've got so many different drivers. So the four classes, but it's the body of drivers because you want to do each and every one of those drivers justice by telling their story. And so IMSA is complex. It's a little easier when it's one car, one driver, etc. But the complexities of IMSA make it challenging. Marathons, marathons are tough. So whether it be at the Olympics or the Olympic trials, that's tough. I remember prior to Paris calling the Olympic marathon trials in Florida. We were in Orlando, and it kicked off early in the morning because of the temperatures, and the sun was shining over our back. We had this great studio, but the sun was shining over our back onto the monitors, so you couldn't identify any runners for the first bit. And when you've got this, like, all you can see is bodies like that, and you can't really identify anyone, that made it pretty challenging.
Of all the shows that you've done, is there one that would be, for whatever reason, your favorite? You've got a pair of boys, so it's not like you've got a favorite, child. But when you're looking at shows, is there one that if you had a Groundhog Day moment where Leigh Diffey could relive like it's the first time a certain show that you've been a part of?
I would say it's probably my first Indianapolis 500 was really special, and then, even though I had done a little bit before, when I came on board for NASCAR on NBC in 2024, and I got to my first race of that body. I was doing 12 races in succession to finish the season off in 24. Was calling Harrison Burton's win with Jeff Burton sitting right beside me. That's pretty special when you see a father looking down on his son winning his first cup race, racing his way into the playoffs, and it's at the World Center of Racing. That was pretty crazy. So you and I have been very lucky to work some big events and really special events, and so I would say, you know, being welcomed into the NASCAR family that way was really special, and having the honor of calling the Indianapolis 500 has been one of the highlights of my career. And I never thought I'd get to do one, and I got to do six, so I feel super fortunate.
You go back in the day and you look at the early days of NASCAR television. You'd have Jackie Stewart, from the UK, David Hobbs,
Mhm.
our good friend, he would be involved. And then when you got the call to go do NASCAR full time, and there were some people like, oh, he's the Australian guy. And the thing that
No, they don't. They say he's that British guy.
the thing that I always picked up on was so many people, and rightfully so, they picked up on your passion, your excitement to be there in the moment, not what your voice sounded like. It wasn't the Southern accent, it was another accent, but it didn't matter because they love your quality of work. And I think that says so much about you in so many different ways.
What Thank you for that. What I loved most about that first season was going to places I hadn't been. So I had worked with Jeff Burton before. I'd worked with Steve Letarte before, and we're good friends off the air. But going to places like Talladega, I'd driven. No, I used to live in Atlanta, and I would go to Birmingham for Barber Motorsports Park ever since Barber opened.
And you'd see the East Abuga exit.
I'd driven past Talladega endless times, but never been in there. I'd been to the World of Outlaws over at the dirt track, but I'd never been to the big track. Going to Darlington for the first time, that was really special, and I can't wait to go back. Going to Martinsville for the first time. So and Jeff and Steve had remarked that it was fun for them to hear my freshness, like, "Hey, what about that?" And I was asking questions like a first timer, and they'd been there so many times that you look past those things, and we're all guilty of that in
Mhm.
in our lives in whatever regard. I think there's the perception that because we're talking on TV, we're supposed to know everything. Well, we don't know everything. We can't. Nobody knows everything, and I got a lot of joy out of doing those NASCAR broadcasts, telling people that what I didn't know. I've never been here. That caught my attention. Hey, that's interesting. I love this. I saw this. I had my first Martinsville hot dog that was cold until somebody brought me a hot one. And so I did all of those iconic things, I guess, in that first passage, and I really, really enjoyed it. And I loved talking to the fans. I loved hearing the fans' questions. I know that, I wasn't everybody's cup of tea, but nobody is going to be everybody's favorite. But it was fantastic, and I'm really looking forward to this year as well.
Now, did you go all the way with the Jesse Jones Martinsville hot dog, or did you just go light, maybe just ketchup?
It had ketchup, it had, no, it had the chili.
It had the chili
It
on it?
had the chili on it, and, it had some mustard, and yeah, I think, yeah, so if that was I didn't go and buy it myself. Somebody had it there. There was some in the TV
Yeah.
compound, and then when Chip Weil heard that I was forced to eat a cold one, the next day he brought up a bag of hot ones, so I did get to taste it for real.
See, I just go just the ketchup. I go light. I admit it. I'm not gonna go with the whole chili and all that. When you look back through time, and my daughter is going through driver's ed, and at some point she's gonna have a first car. And I look back to when I got my first car and the times that you had with pals. And for you, what was your first car?
I inherited it from my sister, my oldest sister, Juanita. It was a 1972 burnt orange Toyota Corolla.
Burnt orange.
Yeah, and there's a like a candy in Australia called a Jaffa, and this car had a brown interior with this kind of burnt orange exterior, so we used to affectionately call it the Jaffa.
Oh, and you think that could end up being a classic collector car now, possibly? You're seeing all the classic car
I know,
auctions.
I know. It wasn't. I wish it was something more spectacular than that. Like our youngest son, he wants his first car as a vintage pickup truck, and but I got what I could get my hands on at the time, and yeah, happy memories.
Mine said when she was 11, she goes, "Dad, do you realize in 5 years and 5 days that I will be 16 and I can drive a car?" I said, "Every single day." She goes, "I would like a white Jeep, please."
Yeah,
And I'm like, "I'm sure
there
you
you
would."
go.
Well, my friend, thanks so much for stopping by and talking just so much about your whole path. It's so motivational for others. Like Robert Wickens is going to be on the show later, and you look at his story, and it's so incredible that we have followed. And he's going to have another rung on the ladder, making a GT start at Long Beach, which you look at. It's like throwing a rock in the lake and all the ripple effect
Yeah.
that it can affect so many other folks that have that dream to race, but they're a paraplegic and they think it's just a dream. Now that dream can become reality.
Well, um, I was a fan of Roberts before I ever met him. What he did in junior open wheel, and then in DTM, and then when he came to IndyCar and put it on the pole at St. Pete straight away, and then when you meet the guy, you know how special he is, and fortunately or unfortunately, I'm not sure which way to look at it. Still to this day, we were on the mic the day that he had his spinal cord injury, and that was a tough day because for a long time we didn't know what his status was, and that was one of the harder days of broadcasting for sure. After he went to hospital, came out of hospital, and was in recovery. At the time, I was still calling Formula One, and my catchphrase, which I use occasionally now, is "It's time to bring the action." I would say that at the beginning of each Formula One Grand Prix. So I had these stickers made up, and I set up a site, and I would sell these stickers. It's time to bring the action, and was supported by a lot of fans and whatever. And I ended up selling $4,000 or $5,000 worth of it, and I just wrote a check to Robert, and for whatever reason, just to help, just to do something from the motorsport community to him. And he's such an amazing guy. He's like, "Leigh, I have an insurance policy. I don't need that." And I said, "That's not the point. We want this is from us for you. Like." And he's just such an incredible human being, and his drive, his spirit, and we're talking about before, don't give up. That guy is don't give up personified. And, I can't wait to see him race at Long Beach, what he's done in Michelin Pilot Challenge already. I'm so glad that he is a father. He is a truly special human being.
He certainly is, and as are you. All the times that we've had together working, and I always tell people, when you work with people that you look on as brothers and sisters, it's a family, and you never have to worry. It's like Air Force football. You know they're gonna chuck it to you, you're gonna run a few steps, chuck it onto somebody else, and it's just gonna come full circle,
Yep.
and that's why it's so much fun, to work together, on these IMSA WeatherTech shows. So, my brother, a little bit shorter brother,
A
but a
lot,
little bit older.
lot shorter.
But thanks for stopping by. So many great stories.
Thank you. Great to be here. Great to finally be in this studio, and it's great to be part of this era of IMSA because sports cars is in a special spot.
It's definitely the golden era. Storytelling is all the endless challenge of trying to match up the perfect words to what is being shown on a TV screen. Now, if you're a still photographer, that challenge takes on an even greater level, especially if you're Josh Paul from Lollipop Magazine. I go to Sebring and I happen to look over at the end of pit lane and I saw Josh there with a 112-year-old camera. And I was like, oh my God, I've got to check this out. Josh, is that pretty much the reaction that everyone gives you when they first see your camera?
I do get that, and oftentimes I'm in the pit lane trying to shoot a car coming out of the garage, and a photographer wants to do a selfie. And I'm like, "I'd love to meet you and say hi, just not the best timing." Yeah, it's been a great friend maker.
So When did you pick up the camera? What model is it? Because it has to have some incredible history behind it.
So in the late 90s, I was in art school. I was at Art Center College of Design in Pasadena, and my instructor was James Fee. And we spent an entire summer in the dark room. And at some point, he came to me and he said, man, you need to loosen up. And he gave me one of his cameras in exchange for helping him print an edition and clean his dark room. So that was in the late 90s. And what he gave me was a Graflex Auto RB. It's from 1913. And it's a single lens reflex, large format 4x5 camera. So it's this incredible, I mean, usually large format cameras are on a tripod and you put the dark cloth over your head. This is one I can hand hold and shoot frame by frame just by, changing the plates after every shot.
So when did you take this camera and then your passion for recording moments in time and then marry that to an auto race?
So I'd taken the camera traveling and had been to Prague and been to Cuba, and it really captured, these timeless images there. And then I photographed September 11th. I was sent down to Ground Zero by the New York Times Magazine. And after that, I kind of put it away. Things were dark and moody, and the climate wasn't the best for the camera. And I literally put it away for 10 years or so. And then when I got invited back to Formula One after my first season, I thought, how can I shoot the second season differently than the first? And I thought maybe I should dust off the Graflex and shoot Monaco in period. And that's the first time I brought it to a car race. And it was one of those just lay in bed all night trying to think of what to do. And I brought the camera out, and I didn't have great results with it, but I stuck with it for the year, and it started to come together.
When you look at shooting, everyone with a digital camera, it's take a million shots and you'll pick out whichever one you like the best. When you're shooting in film, you'd always take it to photomat and you hope that you've got something when you get back.
Mm.
But when you're looking at something like your camera, explain to the folks at home and that are listening exactly, it's not just film in there. It's not like taking, 35 millimeter. Explain how the image is recorded so that then you can produce it.
Well, I am shooting on film, so I need to have need to have a light meter, know what the shutter speed is and what the aperture is going to be. Where my digital camera is much smarter than I am. I mean, I just point and shoot, and it's going to come out perfectly with probably the latitude of 4 stops in either direction. With this, I'm limited to about 100 frames per weekend. So a lot of it is just observing, through the lens. I'm watching action take place. I'm imagining where somebody might be, where some action might happen, and I'm coming, in and out of that situation. I'm hoping that all the circumstances come together at the right time. So a lot of it's anticipation. A lot of it is, kind of showing restraint and not shooting the film, or shooting the frame, I should say. And I get that same joy of taking my film to the lab and wondering what's on it. That's probably the best part, is I get to go to the lab after a couple of days, might even be a week if I have to travel back from one of the races that are abroad. And I kind of sit and look on a light table and look at the negatives. And I'm always excited to see the film. That's something you don't have in digital. And a lot of it, I mean, I shoot digitally and I love the digital camera, but I can literally shoot 4,000 frames on one memory card. It's just too much. And I will too. You can't stop.
Now, when you're looking at this type of setup with your Graflex, basically, do you have to change your mindset from going to a normal event where you're documenting the race and maybe a certain corner, where with this type of setup, you have to take a step back and then you're documenting the event, the people, and the sites that you're seeing, not so much documenting that race and who could be leading?
Yeah, I decided kind of early on that, it's funny. So I make a print magazine, and we made the magazine Lollipop. We realized that we didn't throw in the podium ceremony and the champagne spray. We kind of showed more the mechanics and the workers that make this whole, race take place over 4 days. And so what I'm shooting now, while I'm out on track trying to get shots, it's really not the best camera for panning a car going 200 miles an hour. We're just following the car by. So I mostly shoot this in the pit lane or in the paddock, or I try to have one-on-one portraits. So I'll request with the teams, ask if I can photograph a driver or team principal or, chief mechanic, and, find a nice light, try to meet them in the morning, the afternoon, have a coffee, and just treat it like a portrait session rather than a race. And, I hope the photographs go much, further than just a single event. You'll want to keep looking back at them. And it's funny, a lot of times when people buy prints, they want a print that's 10 years old. And I can see the car is very dated, but it doesn't matter. And I like that it, that the time doesn't impact that.
I saw an ad for Graflex from 1912, and it said, "Why Graflex? You are ready instantly to take that picture which you may never have another chance to get." And it's so ironic because whether it's 1912, 1913, or 2025, it's still the same agenda. It's just with different tools.
Well, and also, I mean, how cool to wonder what this camera has seen over the last century. I mean, it is the most unlikely place for this wooden leather camera to end up in motorsport. I mean, at these most high-tech levels of motorsport with IMSA, these GTP cars and F1 cars and state-of-the-art NASCAR. I mean, it's so funny that it is, again, wooden leather, a brass lens, and that's it. Sheet of film here and there. And no batteries, no cables to get tangled up or leave it home or leave on the, on the flight. It's incredible. It's a very freeing object for me.
How do you travel with it? Obviously, you're not going to check it.
Can I show it to you real quick? Let me show you this guy. So it's pretty big, weighs about 10 pounds, and the hood folds down. The front closes up. So this will fit in a padded backpack. So I travel, you're limited with the carry-on weight. I've got a backpack that weighs about 50 pounds. You just don't know it weighs 50 pounds. So I've got this camera, an extra lens, a digital body, and some batteries. And it's just on me at all times. That's the one thing that doesn't leave my body, my passport and my Graflex. Seems to work so far.
You mentioned the film. So what's that process? Describe it, and how do you change that within the camera?
So I'm shooting 4x5 sheet film, and it fits in this plate. And each sheet is behind this holder. When I expose the film, I basically lift this plate, it's called a dark slide up to expose the film. And then once I expose it, I put it back in, and then I flip the plate to shoot the second side. So I travel with 15 of these plates. And after I shoot the 30 frames, because, 2 on each plate, I go back to either the media center where I find a spot where I can change my film in a what's called a portable tent. My hands go on one side, and I change the film in the dark. And again, just, take a glass of water, relax, don't worry about missing anything, and just make sure I get the exposed film in the exposed box and the unexposed film back in the camera so I can do it again. I made that mistake a couple times and had a whole bunch of double exposures of all the first-year drivers in Australia one time. So that happens once.
So what is more dramatic when you shoot with the Graflex? Nighttime shots, rain shots, or big bright summer type shots?
I'm gonna go with the rain and the cloudy, overcast. I mean, drama looks good on black and white. A sunny day to me is really boring. We love being in the sun and having SPF 50 on and getting a nice tan, but I want the clouds and I want the movement. I want the spray of the water coming off the rear tires. I often shoot in pit lane if I get the pit lane access, and I become friends with most of the mechanics in Formula One at least. So they let me get a little closer than I should be. I'm within 3 or 4 feet of the car coming out, and they'll let me know, and they'll give me a nudge on the arm or pull my shoulders back. But yeah, but it's exciting to have a car coming right toward you, and I know that it's going to pass, and you hear the roar of the engine and the tires squeaking and the gear shifting. It's so exciting. I mean, the whole thing is an action, and hopefully I get to capture that on film.
When we go back to certain images, and you mentioned 9/11, and there are so many images from that day, that period, that are etched in everyone's memory forever. What was the image, and what were you trying to harness, so to speak, with the Graflex that ended up in the New York Times Magazine?
Well, I mean, I heard it happened from my bedroom window, and so we were all in shock, of course, and didn't know what to do. And I didn't think to take pictures at all. I mean, a lot of my friends were all running down, and a lot of my friends were photojournalists and documentary photographers, and I didn't have a place there. The New York Times called me and said, "Hey, if you happen to go down, or you have an idea, let us know." And it came to me instantly to take the Graflex down. I thought I would arrive closer to ground zero, and I wasn't. I was only allowed to about Canal Street, which is about a half a mile or a quarter of a mile north. So when I got off the subway, what I first saw was firefighters coming out of the rubble up 6th Avenue, Avenue of the Americas, just covered in dust. And it was so incredibly powerful. I didn't need to see the buildings or anything more than that. That told the story for me. It was also, I mean, I'm getting chills telling the story. it was also, I had to give everyone space because I hadn't seen what they'd seen, even though I had been hugely affected by it, like the rest of Americans and the rest of the world. At one point, you know, I mean, I guess I was anticipating these moments, but suddenly a guy in jeans and no shirt comes out waving a huge flag, and the flag has the perfect fold. I mean, he couldn't have styled it any better, but I have this one frame, and that to me just kind of captures it all. It's you know where it is, you know when it is, and a photograph shouldn't need words. And that's often what I'm trying to achieve. I think, most good photographers are trying to achieve that. Let the photo speak for itself without a caption, you know.
Well, Josh, when I looked over at the end of pit lane and I saw you, and I was like, I have got to ask about this. And we did an interview. And so you made a lot of friends at the Sebring IMSA WeatherTech race. So where is the second IMSA race going to be for Josh Paul and Lollipop Magazine?
Well, I'm intrigued by it, and I was hoping to go to Long Beach. I've got some F1 coming up. I'll be at Le Mans, and then from there I'll regroup on what's going to happen for the rest of the summer. But I love the cars. I loved the people. Love the new circuits. They're new to me, at least. Again, the access is incredible. I mean, what blew me away about Sebring was, I mean, not only just how raw the track is and the surface of the track is, but how tight the paddock is with 50, garages or so. Not the paddock, but the pit lane with 50 garages or so, and all these teams. I mean, in F1, it's like a suite at the Four Seasons. These guys have, 4,000 square feet. And here they're working in probably, God, I mean, 200, 300 maximum. And they had two prototype cars. I mean, it's very impressive. So I would love to spend more time, document that and capture that, capture the grit of what these guys are doing, what they're pulling off. It's also a new audience because I haven't been, even though I live in the United States, I live in Brooklyn. I've been shooting everything out of the country. So I'm so happy to be, shooting races in the United States, meeting all these other fans, meeting all these racers. I mean, I probably met 15 or 20 racers at the race as well. And, throughout the weekend, they're saying, "Hey, Josh, how's it going?" I'm like, "You remember me?" And same in the NASCAR paddock. I'd photograph, Chase Briscoe, and he's about to get in his car and race. Like, "Hey, man, how'd those photos come out?" I'm like, "You seriously, you're about to race a car and you're asking about the photos." So, it's been a great way to make more friends.
Well, Josh, I appreciate all that you do capturing these moments that, like you mentioned, one image and you're looking at it and it's telling you 1,000 words. What's in the background, what's in the foreground. It's always incredible to snap those moments in time that will last for generations and generations to come.
Thank you, Matt. I'm looking forward to doing it again and seeing you back on the pit lane.
Absolutely, my friend. See you at the track soon. Our final stint on this edition of the IMSA Endurance Hour podcast, we hit the road and hit the DXDT Racing shop and catching up with Robert Wickens as he's heading to Long Beach for his first WeatherTech start of this year, and with the beautiful Corvette. So much has gone into this chapter of your racing career. Can you believe finally it's here?
I mean, yeah, look at it. It's perfect backdrop. I'm just excited, man. I mean, I think that's the biggest thing is, we can talk about the past and we can talk about all the struggles and the hard times and everything. And it's like just seeing this with Long Beach just around the corner now, it's all the hard work was worth it. But it wouldn't be possible without a great support system with everyone around me, from my wife, Carly, and all my friends and family, loved ones, and then professional career, Brian Hurd Autosport, Sean Jones, Brian Hurd, giving me my first chance in the Michelin Pilot Challenge. It's, yeah, it's going to be awesome. It's going to be really cool. And there's no better place, I think, for my story than to actually get into the WeatherTech series and that Corvette Z06 GT3R than at Long Beach, because it's kind of my, old career, new career, all the same place. So it's going to be cool.
You've heard the line so many times. You've got to be your own advocate. And for you, this chapter began because you reached out to Bosch because you had an idea of how to improve your situation behind the wheel. And what was that like, and when did it happen? Because it seems like it was a very short window to have so many great things happen.
So I actually didn't know this at the time until I watched the Breaking Barriers series that Bosch did on our road to racing with the Bosch EBS last year. But Jordan Krell, one of the engineers at Bosch, he was actually at Mid-Ohio in 2021 when I drove the Hyundai Veloster NTCR car for the first time, when I used Michael Johnson's hand controls and his race car for that one test day that we did in Mid-Ohio. And he was blown away by it, and he started brainstorming on like, I think we have technology that can make this better. And then one thing led to another. I got onto the grid in the Michelin Pilot Challenge Series in 2022. And then while we were challenging for the championship in 2023 at Road America, at this point, the GTP cars were well on their way, and the Bosch EBS was existing as the rear braking solution in those cars. Yeah, I was able to, through my engineer at the time, Kyle Compton, he went to school or had worked previously with people at Bosch, and we all just kind of came together, and I was blown away by how many Bosch personnel came to this, meet and greet that we set up to kind of start talking, and they kicked it off saying, I think we have technology that can really benefit you. And I was like, that's music to my ears, because I thought the same thing. And then it's been the best thing that's happened in my rejuvenated career, is because it just gave me a platform to grow. The system that we were using previously in the TCR car, it was good for what it was, but it had a lot of downfalls. It had a lot of latency in applying the brake and an inconsistent amount of latency. So as a driver, it's not like you could just, count one Mississippi and know that it's going to work. It was kind of always a little bit different. So it took a lot of conscious thinking of applying the brake so gently to see what braking you have, and then from that react and apply the brake properly for the corner. So I had this like really unique braking style that I like adapted and learned. But that's all out the window now, because now with this Bosch EBS here in this Corvette, there's no latency. It's just like the most flawless, well integrated thing I could have imagined, and it's gone better than I have ever hoped.
They just seem so excited about taking on a project like this because of the enormity of the results and what it could mean, not only for you, but for so many other folks. Are they sort of like the MacGyver of motorsports, in that when they've got a problem, they're the folks to call, especially with electronics, to try to come up with a new idea?
I mean, I think the process of developing this braking system, that the Bosch EBS, it's not a brand new system, but where it's unique is how we're applying it in my use, right? It's supposed to live in parallel with a hydraulic braking system like the front axle and GTP, and then the rear axle is the Bosch EBS, and then it does the hybrid regen and everything else to do all that fun stuff. But the full brake-by-wire capacity that we're using it in, it took some teething, it took some getting used to, it took a lot of software stuff that I'm not even going to pretend that I understand. But it was a really, really fun journey. Of the first time we track tested the car at Putnam Park in the Hyundai Elantra NTCR car, it was just a lot of software mapping, and like I would apply the brake and say like, I want to make it feel a little different, and then they're just like, okay, they go write lines of code and do what they got to do, and then suddenly like 5 minutes later it just gets sent through the cloud and to the car, and off we go, and it's exactly what I wanted. And like I just felt like it was just very, like, everyone was motivated, because also I think an engineer always wants to engineer, right? Like you want to create something that doesn't exist and something that's a better product than what it previously was. And you can see that from the design, especially on this Corvette Z06, the hand control system that actually Pratt Miller designed and developed. It was just a fun journey of, going down to Detroit and seeing Pratt Miller. Obviously their facility is incredible. And then, I would get to their car, and they had like the GM test mule car there, and it was with a 3D printed concept of all the paddles and everything, and you'd feel them around, and obviously they're plastic, like a little rickety, and you never know like what it's actually going to feel like, and give some feedback. And then a week later they'd ask me to come back down, and I'd drive from Indianapolis down to Detroit again and have version 2 of 3D printed concepts, and just like constantly just pushing and pushing, and then the Zoom calls and everything else that followed. So you could tell there was a lot of motivation, which also kind of, I think it just brought the best out of everybody, but it took a full effort from Chevy, from General Motors, Pratt Miller, DXDT, Bosch. My internal working group was Jordan Krell, Jordan Smart, and Jeff Blair. And I was blown away by how much time I got from them at all times. At the track, they were there before I got there. They left it later than I left, later than the mechanics left, because Bosch says, like, we're happiest when our stuff just exists behind the scenes and you never know or you never hear about it, right? Like, that's when we're doing our job. And to put that in full effect to the point where there'd almost be these like vigilantes, like working after hours, making the system better, and you'd show up with this like better product. I'm like, did you guys even go to sleep last night? They're like, no, we were here till 1 a.m. It's fine. But so much hard work went into it, and I think, this beautiful car is just the representation of it.
Well, you talk about the initial meeting, and then there was a little bit of a delay when they circled back. Was it tough being patient through this whole process? Because racers, all you want to do is, okay, we got a problem. Let's fix it. Let's move on to the next.
We all know I'm not patient. My wife Carly can definitely comment on that one. But I think the big thing was with the IMSA calendar when we met that Road America weekend, you're kind of in the middle of that like really hot and heavy season schedule of IMSA where it's a race weekend off, a race weekend off. And, at the time, 2023, myself and Harry Gotzak were putting together our championship campaign in TCR. So we were also trying to stay focused on that task.
So you had some distractions. So you weren't just sitting there totally focused going, please ring, please ring.
Yeah, we also had a 1-year-old son at home too. So there's definitely no shortage of distractions, but good distractions. But I think that was the big thing. It was, trying to kind of keep that going, trying not to put it on the side burner because I feel like then it just wouldn't progress, but to frankly just trust the process and trust that it's going to happen. And honestly, the meeting was so positive that even though we didn't hear from them for a little bit, I kind of didn't think they were just going to like ghost me, but they were really just compiling what they need, and do it properly and do it correctly, and that's exactly what they did. And when they came to the table, it was a full list of here's what we need to do. Instead of just, kind of shooting from the hip.
So the dream has become reality. You're going to be running in WeatherTech in 2025 in the Corvette. What are some of the changes that you have had to make to acclimate yourself to the Corvette and also the difference in racing that you'll be experiencing?
Yeah, I mean, difference of racing, TBD. Haven't done that one yet in this Corvette, so it's going to be. I think everything's just like up to another level, right? I think the competition in the IMSA Michelin Pilot Challenge Series is really strong. But I think the depth that you have in GTD, in the IMSA WeatherTech Series is just next level. It doesn't matter if it's GTD Pro or GTD. It's the same car. It's the same BOP. It's scored differently, but you're racing 20-something GTD cars, not necessarily just in your class. So I think it's going to be intense. I won't really know what I've signed up for until I think I take the green flag in Long Beach, but I'm up for the challenge. This is exactly what I wanted. I want to race against like the best teams, best cars, best drivers, in the pinnacles of motorsport. And in my opinion, the IMSA Michelin Pilot, the IMSA WeatherTech Series, is exactly that.
And it's not going to be the last time you do that.
No, I've been saying the Michelin Pilot Challenge Series for a while now, so.
When you got in the car at Sebring for the test and you're sitting in the seat, you're doing your belts, what was it like to finally be home because you have dreamt about that moment and now that dream has become reality? So was reality even greater than the dream at that point of finally getting in a GT car?
It was. I remember the days leading up to that, and it kind of reminded me a lot of when I had the chance to get my Formula One young driver testing chances in years ago now. I'm aging myself, but like that 2011 era when I was Formula One reserve driver and got to do some young driver F1 tests in Abu Dhabi. And it's like you want to make the most of your opportunity. And the best way to do that is be prepared, right? Obviously physically prepared for a car that you don't know the demands of. Mentally prepared there's a lot more systems at your disposal. And understanding where all that stuff lives. The whole control panel inside this Corvette Z06, every button has a function and there's a reason why it's there, So I asked Pratt Miller, for the manual weeks leading up, and it's a 58-page user manual of what each button does. And I studied it and studied it and studied it because when you get into that car, you want all of your focus to be on the car and the system and extracting lap time, not also, Yeah, if they say go to ABS 3, you know, you don't want to take a few corners trying to find it in your cockpit. You know, you want to know exactly where it is and what you have to do, right? And not radio back, where's that button? And then the engineers maybe then looking at the manual themselves and going like, it's the third button on the right-hand side, second row, right? It's just, no one wants that. So I just tried to be as prepared as I could.
So what's the biggest takeaway from Long Beach after watching the last three that you're putting in the back of your mind? Like, this was something that was constant through all three races that you watched.
It's a track position race. That's the big thing. You know, it's only 100 minutes. In the GTD class, it's basically a pretty simple one stop where whoever the starting driver is, you just want to get to that minimum drive time and pit as soon as you can to cover yourself from a safety car because the pit's closed under safety car. And then seemingly it might be a small fuel save to get to the end, but it's a very doable fuel save. And it's a street course with big race cars and multi-class racing. So track position is just going to be so vital.
One of the most important, crucial aspects of track position is having a good pit stop. Traditionally, you know, teams only need 14, 15 seconds of fuel. So usually it's, you know, just 2 tires, driver change, and you're gone. You've got, you know, Josh Gibbs back with you. He's going to be your driver assist to help extract you out of the car. So you look at this, I mean, there's so many challenges. What are some of the processes that you two have worked on to try to keep it smooth, clean, but also at a really good pace?
So that's actually why we're here today. You know, we were planning on doing this in Sebring during the 2-day test, but for schedule reasons, Josh couldn't make it down, and so you know, here we are a couple weeks later at the DXDT shop here, and that's the plan this whole afternoon. We've done a couple kind of runs of show to walk it through slowly to make sure one, we don't physically harm me in any way, and also keep us a little fresh to actually hit the ground running this afternoon. So I think that's kind of the unknown, you know, in TCR and in the Mission Pilot Challenge series, there was a minimum fuel time, you know, so if you were filling from empty to full, it was 52 seconds of fuel. So there was never really an urgency to do a sub 20-second driver change practice, because even if you weren't taking fuel, but you wanted to take tires, you know, it was like a 5 lug nut tire change. And like with only one guy per side and everything, that all the regulations and people over the wall in the IMSA series, you know, a good tire change was maybe 14, 15, 16-ish seconds. And like you wouldn't really take tires if you weren't taking at least 20 seconds of fuel. So like you always had basically a 20 to 25 second window to do your driver change. And if you're doing a full fill, you would feel like you were sitting in the car for an eternity waiting for fuel to go into the car. So we need to push that a lot. You know, I think we realistically need to get our change done in 15 seconds to not be at risk of losing positions. That still probably won't even gain us spots, but at least it won't lose us spots. And I think that's kind of the goal right now.
So you're going to run 5 this year. Realistically, the goal for Long Beach, because there's so much new with this program, with you, and what would be a great day? Obviously, you're chasing the trophy, you're chasing a podium, but is there something along the way as far as the system, the routines that you want to try to get down that you're hoping to leave there with, hey, we put a check mark next to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think just be competitive. You know, so much can happen in motorsport, whether if it's, you know, you catch traffic in the wrong spot or you get caught up in a incident in front of you and it's a temporary circuit, there's nowhere to go. Like there's so many different variables that can come into play in Long Beach. But for us, I mean, internally, I would love to leave there with a competitive result. You know, I don't know if that's a win, a podium, a top 5, a top 10, but you know, I want to leave there with my head high, knowing that, you know, we were competitive, and hopefully have the result to back it up. And we'll just have to wait and see.
You motivated, as you mentioned, the whole Bosch team to work on this incredible project. Along the way, you meet so many fans at all the different races that you go to, but the personal appearances. Have you met somebody that you were a big motivation to them because, you know, they're a paraplegic and they were chasing something similar to you?
Honestly, it always puts a smile to my face when, you know, I have the chance to meet so many people at these IMSA events, and you hear so many stories of even the ripple effect of, you know, when I was going through my struggles and fighting for my recovery, it motivated so and so to get into sports therapy or, being a physiotherapist or occupational therapist or whatever, or even from there, from how it changed their lives. And it's amazing. I was just trying to give myself the best quality of life I could for myself and my wife. And then also once I kind of felt like I was on that journey, then I switched focus to like, okay, now how do I drive again? Because that's really what I want to do. But it's not only people going through a similar struggle. There was people when I was doing my rehab at Craig Hospital in Colorado that were motivating me because I was just one of hundreds of people going through spinal cord injury or traumatic brain injury in that facility, just putting in the work. And I was doing 6 hours a day, 6 days a week, and I wasn't the only one. I'm just grateful that I had a platform to show what I was doing. And, there was so many people that you met, crazy stories on how they got there. And yeah, I mean, it's not necessarily someone going through a disability. It might be, a tough part of their life or health complications or whatever the case is. But I love hearing the stories. So for everyone listening, don't stop. It really puts a smile on my face hearing that you guys made it through as well.
Whenever you go through different chapters in your lives, you always grow, you always learn through different situations that you've experienced. But everybody always is chasing that perfect balance of life, family, friends, your career. Do you feel like you're in that sweet spot now or getting close to it?
I would say we're getting close. We're trending in the right direction for sure, right? I think until I'm a full-time competitor in the IMSA WeatherTech series, I think I'm still going to be chasing the dream. I'm treating this year like a 5-race tryout, which really it is. I'm not doing the full season, and I need to show to sponsors, to OEMs, to team owners that I deserve to be a permanent staple in the IMSA WeatherTech series. And I think once I can achieve that, hopefully we can just run off into the sunset, winning races and championships, and then be it kind of have that perfect balance of life. And I think, I owe so much to my wife Carly for the sacrifices that she does on a daily basis to allow me to pursue my professional careers. And not only that, be a great mother at home. We have a 2.5-year-old son at home, Wesley, and he's a bundle of energy, but he's so much fun. And I think seeing, he's well aware of what a race car is now, which scares me, but I think that balance is getting really close, but I need to be a full-time driver in the WeatherTech series.
So Wesley is 2.5. You conjure up images that when you were a kid, and we all do, about that first moment where you're like, oh my gosh, what is this? This is fantastic. And then it becomes, your life love as far as a sport and hopefully a career. So what was that magical moment for you when all of a sudden auto racing clicked in Robbie Wickens' mind?
So I think it clicked before I knew it clicked. I think I was just that high energy child that couldn't sit still. And I think I think it was even a NASCAR race or something, but it was just on TV. And I was just like hypnotized by the cars. Like my jaw dropped and my parents were like, oh my God, he's finally not moving. And he's just content. And then they went out and they bought me all the Hot Wheels cars and stuff. And then I was just obsessed with cars. And
you did races on the carpet. You had tracks set up, and
man, I took it to the next level. So I have a 5 years older brother, Trevor. And then basically because aging again, but Days of Thunder had just come out, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we had that on VHS, and that was on constant loop in the house. And yeah, like we would watch a race, we would recreate the race. I even got like Sharpies, and I would like rubber in the carpet as the race would go on, and like
you had the cap on.
no.
Oh God.
Well, it was no, but it was like a track, right? Like,
right. Okay.
But yeah, so unfortunately, my parents would have to buy me new ones for each race that I wanted to do. But yeah, so like it would start off as a green track, and then as the race went on, I would like slowly like color in the groove a little bit. If there was a crash, I would like trace the tire marks to the wall, and I used like masking tape to make like concrete walls around, and then like I'd scuff up the walls if someone like brushed the wall and stuff. I got pretty detailed, but yeah, it was cool. What my parents didn't like is I would also like if a car crashed, I would put it under the couch and like
mash it down.
But you didn't want to mash it flat because that's not how they crashed. You had to get it like upright so it like buckle in the hood and stuff.
Oh, that's awesome.
That was tough. But yeah, so for me it was always cars. And what's cool is, with my son Wesley, like he's already like cars everything, and I'm sure everyone says that their kid's the best kid in the world, but he is basically. He loves Lego right now, which is really fun. So it's something that I didn't get into until I think a lot later in my life. My brother was a huge Lego guy, and then I would always just break his Lego. But now seeing him build cars and stuff and like play around, like at the airport, whenever they have those little like Lego vending machines, I always just like buy the whatever car, if it's a truck, a tractor, a fire truck, whatever the case is, and like get home and we just like build it together. And they had these little basically like F1 cars. And he actually like built it, like went through each page, told him like, what, do you find that piece? And like, it took us all day, but like he pretty much built like an F1 Lego by himself at 2.5. And I was like, how does this even happen? And then now that it's built, he takes it all apart and he puts it back together and like changes the wheels and stuff. And like, he loves the movie cars. So we have like little car action figures and car like that he can play with, and uses like the Guido guy to like do pit stops and stuff. And like, it's cool. It's a really fun time now just to kind of watch his imagination and see like where it goes.
So doing some research one time for an interview with Ron Fellows, I was talking to a couple of his teammates that he shared cars with, and one gave me a great piece of information. And I said to Ron, I go, so my people tell me that you can open a beer bottle with a hockey stick. And his reply was, he didn't confirm or deny it. He goes, well, doesn't every good Canadian? So do you have that talent?
I do. I do share a talent of, I can pretty much open a beer can or a beer bottle with almost anything. Yeah, I used a water bottle the other day. So yeah, fun little trick. I've actually never tried. Does he do the blade or the knob?
I was
wonder.
told the blade.
Oh, I'm gonna have to ask him
I
about
mean,
that.
that's why he's a Hall of Famer.
He does play hockey.
Yeah.
Like, I know he does do a lot of beer league hockey. I think he has slowed it down a bit recently, but he was always playing hockey in the off season. Maybe not sharing that he was, but he was. But yeah.
He calls that trade secrets. Don't give away info
Yes,
you
sorry,
don't have
yeah.
to give.
Probably.
Lower everyone else's expectations.
You can just bleep that whole sentence out.
So your teammate for Long Beach, Tommy Milner, his first car was a BMW station wagon. What was Robbie Wickens' first road car?
So my first road car that I actually had solely to myself was the first car that I got when I signed with Mercedes and DTM. So, apart from that, it was always just borrowing parents' cars here and there. I never had my own. It was kind of trying to negotiate with my brother or my parents if I could take the car to go see a friend or go see whatever. So even when I was living on my own in Europe, I never had a car. I was taking trains, buses, bikes. When I was my first years of living in the UK, it was a 12-mile bike ride to my gym, and I would ride my bike 12 miles there, work out, ride my bike 12 miles home, rarely on sunny conditions. And that's just what I got used to, and so a part of signing for an OEM is often a company car. And so my first car that Robert Wickens had in his own possession was a C63 AMG. So it took me until I was 22 years old to get it, but yeah, it was a cool one.
Well, thanks to our guests stopping by, Leigh Diffey, Josh Paul, and Robert Wickens. And you also for spending time with us here on the IMSA Endurance Hour podcast. For more great IMSA content, be sure to check out Season 3 of Win the Weekend, presented by Michelin. This season's second episode just dropped, so head over to IMSA's YouTube page to check it out. Remember that in 2025, you can watch the Michelin Pilot Challenge Series live on IMSA's YouTube page and commercial-free in the USA, and free globally for our sports car fans, thanks to our friends at Michelin. For more sports car podcast content, check out our pals from This Week in Sports Cars with Marshall Pruitt and Graham Goodwin, the Double Stint podcast with John DeGeese and Jonathan Grace, and Hindy's Midweek Motorsports podcast. All great shows loaded with content. If you'd like to see more of Josh Paul's incredible work, go to lollipop-gp.com. Always remember to subscribe to our show on your favorite podcast app or IMSA's YouTube channel. Leave your comments and feedback or hit me up on X. We'd love to hear what you think about the show and would like to see more here on the IMSA Endurance Hour podcast. For the whole team here at the IMSA Endurance Hour podcast, I'm Matt Yocum. Thanks for stopping by.